Looks like we have something going now. All right, and we have some stream. One, two, three. Can you guys hear me? Is anyone out there? 1, 2, 3. Hello, Orange Tabby. Hello, Mr. C. Barry. All right. We'll get kicked off here in just a second. Give folks a couple of moments to get signed on. Let me see if I... Okay, good. Yeah, excellent. Nope. Everybody's here on time early. Oh... Well, I guess we can go and kick off with a little idle chat. What's going on, guys? Who's up to what? Who's elbow deep in a build right now? Hello, Vic, Chris, Jeff. Good to see you. Well, we'll get kicked off here in just a minute. As you can gather by all the bad box art I have up on the image, we're going to be talking about worst box arts, and I have a couple of stories for you and a few things, odds and ends, and then we'll move on. Had lunch a little early and having my tea, so this time hopefully I won't be hacking through the whole thing. Oh, the Nash Bridges CUDA. Yeah, you know, somebody in our neighborhood had a CUDA back in the 70s when they weren't quite as uncommon. Sadly, he was a teenager too, and he fell asleep at the wheel and totaled it. He wasn't hurt, but back then it was just kind of a oddball sports car. But now I think they're $500,000 cars. In fact, I don't know if that CUDA was John Johnson's actual car or not, but I remember one episode of Nash Bridges, he was talking about how few were made and how much it was worth, and that's when that show was on. Yeah, $140 later, yeah. Oh, Gloucester Gladiator. I had built the Lindbergh Gloucester Gladiator, which is one of their better kits, back when I was a regional jet captain in Columbus, Ohio, and I actually had shown some pictures of it I found. And I recently just rediscovered it. I'd given it to a friend of mine when I moved, and he has it under glass. It's still perfectly good condition. Very, typical one of my crash pad builds of the era, but I was just happy to see it was still in one piece. 2 B-17s. Oh. Well, I guess it's about time, so we can go ahead and get the ball rolling. So, as you guys may or... I'm going to speak as if you haven't seen some of the videos here, not up to speed on what's going on, just to get some backstory. I had talked about the late Craig Cadera. Well, Mike Machat, who has Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat, was a lifelong good buddy of his. And after Craig passed, Mike was entrusted with taking care of his very substantial collection, which the estate. Mike is handling it for the estate. Well, anyway, long story short was Mike was in Central Florida, and I happened to be coming home from a trip the other day, and I was like, hey, I'll be in Orlando if you want to get together for lunch. Oh, hey, John, you made it. Great. Sanguar, good to see you. Raymond? Great. So, I managed to go out to where he was at, and we went and had lunch together. He had his friend Glenn with him. And, of course, we talked. That's, as you guys probably know, that's where he gave me that Jack Linwood comp of the SE5, which I thought about putting up here on display on the desk cam, but I decided not to use the desk cam today, and I didn't want to really take the picture out and put it where I might spill something on it. So you guys have seen the picture. We'll be talking about it later in this broadcast. But yeah, Johnny, I'd go with the color on the show because that's what people remember it as. And there's a lot of times that colors had to be made had to be. Hey, Daryl. A lot of times that there were color compromises made. In fact, we can talk about that. A couple of real serious examples in a minute. Anyway, so I met with Mike, and of course, you guys, if you've seen Mike's channel, he is a professional artist. He was actually a staff artist at Douglas Aircraft for like 30 years, as well as having done side commercial work. And he knew Jack Linwood, who painted this. As you guys know, this is my favorite box art ever from the Revell 1/32 scale Spitfire Mark I, and my sister-in-law made this for me. And my brother had this on his bedroom wall for years, and I would just stare at it along with the other artwork. And anyway, so to get one, the Jack Linwood's original pieces of art was a big deal. But Mike also was giving me a lesson in box art. And he and his buddy Glenn and some others have a game they play whenever they get together once a month for lunch, and they'll play the 10 game. What's the 10 best box arts? What's the 10 worst models? What's your 10 favorites? That sort of thing. And he asked me, it makes sense. You've been focusing on all the great box art. What are your 10 least favorite box arts? And I wasn't really expecting that. And so I had to chew on that for a second and thought about it. And what I came up with was sort of a take that off, sort of an idea. I've actually spent the last couple of days looking for what I think are the worst box arts, and some of them are here, but for different reasons, and we'll talk about that. Hey, Sledge Master, you made it. Hey, you're working in the garden. Okay, well, I'll try and keep it loud enough for you to hear. I'll shout. Ducking the yard work, yeah. It's funny, we had some folks doing yard work, and they just finished up because I was afraid that the lawnmower would be going by the window while I'm talking. As I'm sitting here looking at the computer, to my left, you're right, there's the bedroom window, and I see out in the street, and I leave one of the Panama blinds open to put a little light in here, a little natural light. Anyway, so Mike gives me this very brief lesson. Hey, Johnny. Oh, Sarah, good. Glad you made it. Sarah Jane's here. And John, the Sanwa guy. So he explains to me how these artworks, done by the masters, work, and how there are certain things you do. And, of course, Jack Linwood was famous for his cheats, which made it... I just actually think just the other day I was talking about that. But he was explaining there's the cool colors and warm colors and the darks and lights. And, of course, to someone like me, conceptually I sort of understand it, but, the details get lost on me. Hey, Kenneth, glad you made it, man. Hey, Mike. So, it was really a great lunch. We could have gone on yakking all day. And poor Glenn just sitting there watching me and Mike go at it. But that got me thinking that'd be an interesting thing to talk about some of the worst box arts that we've ever seen. And since I build mostly military and that kind of stuff, that was kind of where my natural where I gravitated towards, although I'm sure you guys who build a lot of cars probably have some box art that... So the ones we have up here, we're going to go into some detail about most of these, and I've got some blow-ups that we'll show. But some of these are just bad art, and I really don't think I have the worst ones up here, except for that little Academy 109 in the upper right, which is... got pinky, tiny little stick wheels on it. We're going to get into that. But and some of these models, I love the models. This is strictly about the art, including the Kaiju. And we're going to talk about why I think these are some of the worst box art. And a lot of them are early box art. Hey, Adam, glad you made it. They're early box art because obviously, over time, box art improved. One thing we're going to talk about in some detail is Trumpeter. Now, you guys know Trumpeter started in the 90s, and by this time, the art of box art had very much matured. And the idea that there would still be these really, really crappy box art drawings. I know they were coming out of China, but come on, guys. We're going to talk about that when we get to Trumpeter, because although they have good stuff now, some of the early Trumpeter stuff was just an absolute train wreck. You know, John, you're talking about the Paramount Chaparral 2E. I was looking at some cars because I wanted to put a car box art up here, and I may have seen that one. I saw several Chaparrals, but I might see if I can find that before we're out of here. But yeah, and one thing you have to think about now, in that other video, I talked about Keith Ferris, the famous, the who, by the way, although he's 91, he's still with us. Keith Ferris, who's considered the grandfather of modern aviation art. And he's the one that just, every reflection, every rivet, everything, it's just, he is a perfectionist. He's the concert pianist, what do you call him, the prodigy, whereas Jack Linwood was the smooth jazz guy who just, give me an 8-count beat and we'll paint a picture. And of course, you get beautiful stuff like this, the shirt, not me. And so, but Jack had a different mission, as I talked about. The mission statement of Jack Linwood is, make the kid buy the model, and trust me, a box art like that's going to make me buy that model Spitfire, even if I don't need another Spitfire. And whereas Ferris is doing stuff for museums where all the details mattered. I mean, he was counting wing ribs and rivets and all that stuff. And probably some of the finest art ever, put to canvas, period. Never mind just the accuracy of the subject matter. Where we're talking about specifically box art. And what we have to remember is the idea of box art is to make you want to buy the kit. And when I talk about, I'm not just talking about models. I mean, this goes to any box art for any item. Now, obviously, if you're buying a blender, photographs, fine. In fact, that's probably what you want. But when you're selling something that requires assembly, something that a person has to create, you're aiming at their creative juices. You need something to inspire them. You need something that makes them want to go, I want to be in that car. I want to be in that airplane. I want to be in that scene. This is what I wish reality looked like. I'd rather live in that reality. I want to be a part of that reality. And some of the artwork for some of the early stuff is so bad that and even some of the later stuff that I would look at and go, I really honestly think I might not buy the kit, even if I wanted that airplane. And of course, when they started, I got to be honest, and I realize I'm a hopeless romantic, but when it comes to when they started putting the photographs of the built airplanes on the boxes, there was something about that I appreciated, because this is, if properly made, this is what the kit will look like. Although I think somebody made a comment earlier, and they made the comment that some people were probably dissuaded from buying one that had a photograph of the model because they felt like that's a challenge I can't live up to. And I can see that. I can see some, and it doesn't have to be a kid. It could be somebody today looking at that and going, I can't do that good. I'm not going to buy the kit. I just think that, now, my compromise for this, and I know it's the most expensive route because it means putting extra pictures on, but I think it's the best way to do it, is to go ahead and have that beautiful artwork and then have photos of the actual kit in the side panel. It's not as intimidating. You get to see what's actually in the box. And this is my humble opinion. And if you really want to be slick about it, some companies, they'll put a photo on back and then the artwork on front. But some of the artwork is just so disappointing, it's actually a turnoff. So, Lance, we're going to get to that. Guys, Lance over in Tallahassee just was talking about the Aurora armor art. I have several pieces of that we're going to be getting to in just a minute, and you're absolutely right. Some of it looked pretty cool. The Sherman going down the street with the GIs looked cool, but some of their stuff was just horrible. And we're going to get to that. And that's not a reflection. Remember, this is not a reflection on the kits or even the artist. The artist is often doing what he's told to do by the customer. This is strictly we're thinking of it as a commercial enterprise of making art that makes you want to buy the kit. So that's kind of the focus, that we're looking at. Oh, absolutely, Alfred. We were just talking about how box art like this makes you want to buy the kit, makes you want to be part of that reality. Yeah. Okay, well then, without further ado, I think what we'll start with, let me move this over here where I can, technical stuff on my end here. Let me start off with, that's the one. We'll start off with the Kaiju. Now, I am not knocking the kits. Blow this up here a little bit so we can see it. Now, okay, let's see if I can make these a little bit bigger here. All right. Now, here's my problem with the Aurora. Not the kits, but the art. First off, you look on I've got a couple of screen grabs on the right here from the actual movies. You had a lot of really cool King Kong poses, the Empire State Building where he finds Fay Wray. There were a lot of things they could have used. They have him, of course, going through the jungle with Fay Wray in his hand. Okay, that's not bad, but here you have this dark gorilla who's actually not really a bad representation of what's in the kit, but he's got all this jungle behind him. He doesn't stand out. He doesn't pop. And the whole thing's kind of subdued. And to be honest, he doesn't really look all that, what's the word I'm looking? I don't want to say impressive because I don't want a 50-foot gorilla to grab me and, shaking. What do you mean I'm not impressive? No, what it is, I just don't find the artwork that particularly inspiring. The pose and everything. Of course, he is, to their credit, he is emulating somewhat, except he doesn't have his foot up on that little rock, but he is emulating what's in the box. But I don't know, there's something about all those trees behind him and all the muted colors. It just seems to lack something. I think that, of course, without making an entirely different kit where he's up on top of the Empire State Building or something, I think they could have just come up with some kind of artwork to the background or something where he'd have stood out more. And the only red you have is her dress, which, of course, it was a black and white movie. I have no idea what color dress was in his mouth. The thing's just too muddy and muted, although the kit still turned out to be extremely popular. Yeah, Sarah J., I actually just I was watching those, and to their credit, Mike was talking about how he's put out some videos recently, how a lot of the box art, what you see in the artwork is not what's in the box, which became a pretty big issue later on for the kit model companies. To their credit, Aurora was very good with these Kaiju about, and the Monster Series in general, about representing what was in the box. So kudos for that. But the King Kong one just doesn't, I don't know. I just would have liked to have seen something better than that. And the Godzilla, again, and that's why I put them this way side by side, where you can see that it's a fair representation of the kit. The color, first off, Godzilla wasn't green. Godzilla was charcoal gray. And even though it was a black and white movie, I mean, the actual suit was this charcoal gray. So the colors palette's completely wrong. Again, dark and muted. Blood on his hands, which I realize they're just trying to make a horror scene, but I'm like, you don't need that. There were so many other scenes. Now, this Godzilla kit came out in, I think, 63, 64, after King Kong versus Godzilla had been released. So that, I believe, is the Godzilla that they are using for the model. This is not the original Godzilla or Godzilla Raids Again figure. It's a later one. And if you want to get into kaiju lore, suppose they're saying that each one of these movies was a different creature. So I'm like, how many of them are down there? Anyway, but it's, again, fairly honest to the kit, but and of course there are so many fans for the except that his tail is different. But there are so many fans of the product line of the franchise that they sold as fast as they could print them. In fact, I think they actually had to make 2 molds, but they just I don't know. The box art doesn't do anything for me. I don't want to get too snarky here about it, but it kind of looks like something a kid would do in a way, like a coloring book picture more than which is odd because you look at their other franchises like Frankenstein, the Mummy, and the Werewolf. They have much more of a horror vibey feel to them. This one just looks a little cartoony. That's what I'm looking for. It looks cartoony, and yeah, that's true, Ron. Some people love it, and again, I'm not knocking the subject matter. I'm not knocking the kit. Just the artwork didn't do anything for me, and the glow in the darks don't count because they were trying to market the glow in the dark product. So of course, that's in a world of its own. But then again, one could also make the argument they didn't need any fancier artwork because the thing sold itself. So there's that. But I just, I think what happened, and Godzilla, to his credit, the Godzilla they made, I think is a little more accurate to what's in the 63 movie. That's why I put those pictures up there so you could compare it. But Kong I think is off in a few ways. But then again, the state of mold making back then, they had to go with probably frames from pictures because there's no technical drawings for these things. They just had to kind of wing it. And I think, and Mike had made this observation, I think he's right. I think the artist probably used the built-up kits as the model for painting it, not the original movie, because the box does tend to be more honest to the kit. But those are probably my least 2 favorite kaiju and monster box arts. There's just something about them. But again, that's just my read. Now, we're going to be talking about these in more detail, and these are just a wide variety of kits from different companies, but Aurora is going to be on here a lot. And these box arts are bad for different reasons, and we're going to go into detail on some of them. Some of them actually have the artwork is excellent. I think the concept is bad. And some of them are just oh so wrong. So, let's read some comments here. Yeah, I think he's right about that because the box art is virtually identical to what's in the kit, which is good from an honesty standpoint. At least the kid, they didn't misrepresent it. Yes, Ron, you're absolutely right. I think you just nailed it. Ron is talking about how Frankenstein, Dracula, Werewolf were very atmospheric, and the one with Kong and Godzilla, just they don't. To my eye, they don't. The atmosphere is wrong. It's just anyway. Oh, yeah, I do too. John definitely prefer the pictures. And there's the dog barking. That's my sister-in-law's dog. Okay, so without further ado, let's start off with my least favorite Aurora World War I paintings. Or box arts, sorry. I'm going to go through each 3 of these, and what it is about them I don't like. This does not mean that they're not good kits or not even good artwork. I'm going to start off with this D7. Now, this is a me thing, but normally when I buy a kit, I want the model to be obviously the center of the attention, but I kind of expect the model I'm buying to sort of be the hero of the box art, even if it's out by itself or whatever. But here we have a painting of literally a man burning there's a D7 kit, and you're getting to buy the airplane and there's 2 of them who are both for some reason green. And here is the hero kit you're thinking about buying, aflame, with the guy in the cockpit literally screaming his death scream as he burns alive. Now, just speaking for myself, not sure that's a powerful selling message, and I'm not really I'm all about the honesty of these conflicts and history, but you really want an 8-year-old kid to sell him a model of someone burning alive? Yeah, literally going down in flames. Exactly. I don't want to be part of that reality. I actually kind of like want to look away, look away. I also don't really just, that's the big takeaway before I go any further. In addition to that, I'm not really sure about the green, which is the art itself, the airplane itself. The dimensions look right. It's quality artwork. I'm not knocking the artwork from being bad artwork. This is more one of those concept things, and it's unintentionally hilarious, provided you're not one of those two Germans who are both, by the way, going down in flames. I mean, not exactly selling me on the D7 here. Oh God. This is a display suggestion. By the way, this is not the only German airplane that Aurora put out going down in flames. As you guys know, some of the management of Aurora had fought in the Second World War. Abe Shikes had been through the Battle of the Bulge. He was a Russian emigre who fought the Nazis. But I can't help but wonder if some of that didn't play in the decision, because this isn't the only German airplane that Aurora put on fire, and it was the product. Their Messerschmitt 109 was getting shot down, the pilots going out over the side. But hey, Steph Jolu. Yeah, really. But anyway, there's that. So I just couldn't let that one go, because I got to be honest, this is absolutely one of my least favorite box arts ever. It's entirely too brutal for kids, and to be honest, even for adults. I realize it was a brutal war. There's not really any escapism here. I don't want to be part of that reality, and can't get over that green Fokker D7. Although there may have been some green ones. But the whole thing just has negative appeal. Although I understand it's actually a fairly good kit. Okay, now don't get me wrong, if this kit showed up in the mail today, I would keep it in a treasured place because it's still a rare kit. Now we have the Aurora SPAD. Now you probably already guessed, my only problem with this artwork is the angle. The idea of the artwork is to sell the airplane, so you want it in a glory pose, and looking at its naked underbelly, not a flattering image to me. Of course, this is me talking about, well, let's just say I don't like to show too much belly, which in my case is a constant battle. But it's just not an appealing. I mean, that would make a great second airplane if you had a SPAD closer to you in front of it in a hero pose, and then maybe have that to show the outline of the airplane. But it just doesn't work for me. Yeah, exactly, Ron. Doesn't show the most interesting view. The best part of the mold could be, hey, we got the belly light. Okay, now the Newport, the reason I never like this box art is because you don't get a good look at the airplane. And I know they've got one in the background to show the outline, but it just, my guess is this is the second iteration. The first Newport, this kit, had the airplane attacking a balloon, and it was a nice box art. Then they went to this, and what they added were those wing rockets, and I'm sure that's why they painted it this way. Is this is the new feature with the rockets on the wing, which yes, I believe Newports actually did. I don't know if they're quite that big, but they did actually mount rockets to some of these things. I don't know how successful it was, but you've completely altered the box art to sell one aspect of the airplane, and for me personally, it's not bad box art. I just don't care for it. It does not make me want to buy the airplane. One nitpick, just to get technical here, is that it shows the spinning prop, obviously, but you'll notice the radial engine is stationary. And of course, a lot of you guys know that they had the rotating, what they call the rotary engines, which are rotating radial engines. So that engine should be a blur spinning as fast as the prop. And they probably just want to show off a little detail of the engine. But I find it very bleh. That's my technical assessment. Bleh. Ron, you're absolutely right. There were no rules at this point. These guys were pioneers. And don't forget, I'm not faulting the artist, because the artist didn't just make everything up and say, here's your picture. They had people who said, here's what we want. Here's what we want to show. Make it do this. So the artist is the mechanic who puts it together. He's not necessarily the designer. In some cases, they probably are. But Yeah, let's put these hot burning rockets on the spar of airplane that's covered in nitric dope, which means basically the airplane's coated in rocket fuel, and fire them off and see what happens. What could go wrong? Now this box art, is it just me or does this albatross just look lopsided? It's just something about it is just, and it could strictly be my perception, but something just, the purple doesn't help. I don't know. Maybe they painted a couple of them purple. Somehow I doubt it. Yeah, somebody signed off on it. But there's something about the dimensions on this. It looks like the lower wing is longer than the high upper wing. And okay, well, I'm sorry, that's the Aurora logo. The Aurora is in a square logo. That's cutting it off, but it helps sort the whole thing out. But it just something about it's really hard for me to put my finger on this one. It just felt weird, and it didn't make me want to buy the airplane. Let's put it that way. And I think a red albatross would have popped more and been possibly not only more historically correct, but also would have just been a little more of a sales thing, or even a camouflage one. But yeah, it could be forced perspective. Hey, Pops. Yeah, it does. It looks squat and everything, and not loving it. So those are the a few of the Aurora World War I kits. And in fairness, in defense, although the Newport was a second iteration, some of these were probably second iteration paintings. Some of the later box art and earlier box art was actually much nicer. I think a lot of this had to do with, as we said, this was all fairly new at this point. And by the way, just as an aside, I remember this from when I did the Aurora video. These boxes were, and you guys have probably seen them in the older kits, these were the kind that you took, what you're seeing, what you're looking at, the artwork you're looking at was part of a flat. They would order those separately from the printer, pre-cut. And then they would get the boxes from a vendor, which is one of the reasons why the boxes are the same size, thus box scale. And then once Aurora got the boxes and the printed material, then they had to ship all that back out of the factory from once they'd received it. They ship all that to a company who simply glued the paper, the artwork onto the box and folded it in and then sent it back, and then they got the completed boxes. So that was quite the process. And it wasn't like today where they put the ink right onto the box. They actually bought boxes in bulk and bought the artwork in bulk, and it had to be glued on, which is why you see a lot of these old kits where you got the folded over paper glued in place. The nice thing was those heavy boxes really did a good job of protecting the kits. In fact, if you watch Mike's Celebrating Aviation, those last couple of ones he did with the Douglas with the models and the DC-7s, you'll see those some of those boxes are those kinds of boxes. Yeah, I agree. A lot of Aurora's artwork was very, very good. These were just a couple of them that just didn't work for me. Now we were talking about the Aurora tanks, and oh, so much fertile ground to cover here. So let's start off with the Japanese medium tank. Now, I happen to know, and you guys have probably seen the same photo, this has got to be inspired by an actual photograph from Guadalcanal. Only the guy with the bayonet on his rifle shooting, it's the exact pose. The only difference is that it was a Sherman tank in front of him and it wasn't knocked out. He was providing infantry support for it. But other than that, it looks just like it. Now, the artwork is fine. I don't have any problem with the artwork on this. I think it's actually very lovely artwork, and it definitely sets a mood. I mean, you feel like you're in combat there. My only problem, this gets back to kind of the same problem I had with the D7, is here you've got the dead Japanese tank commander or wounded Japanese tank commander slumped in the turret. You've got the tread hanging off. This is not something that makes me want to buy this model tank. The gun's pointed down. It's clearly been knocked out. And again, not showing the primary subject matter in its best light. Although it is a good profile of the tank. But to me, that's just again, it doesn't make me want to buy the model. I'm like, whoa, why would I want to buy a knocked out tank? I'm just reading some of the comments. Now, some people may like this because, I mean, they may have thought, hey, because giving them ideas how to pose it. But and we all know, anybody knows, you know, if you're at all into armor, the Japanese tanks of World War, let's just say the Sherman tank was the Tiger tank of the Pacific. The Japanese tanks were basically just infantry support vehicles, and they tended to get knocked out pretty regularly. So it's a very accurate piece of art. I just don't see it as making someone want to buy the product. And again, not just my opinion. Yeah, it is. It does tell a story. It absolutely tells a story. In fact, we'll get into this a little bit more later. But one of the things Mike asked me about was, does this artwork tell a story? And a lot of them do. And this definitely tells a story. The Japanese are in defense. The Americans are on the attack. The Americans are winning. The Japanese are still putting up a fight, judging by the little explosion going off. He's pretty close to the Japanese. It looks like they just lobbed a grenade, which I assume is that little orange blast going off there. The Americans probably took that tank out with a bazooka and probably shot the commander while he was trying to get out of it. And that would, you know, so from an artistic standpoint, a narrative standpoint, it works. But its ultimate goal is to make you want to buy the tank. And unless you're looking for a Japanese tank, I don't know if that makes you, you know, want to get it or not. Now, I could be wrong. I'm sure the thing sold well. And I think, to my knowledge, they're about the only people making Japanese armor back then. So, and of course, again, these are all vintage kits. So if somehow I came into one, it's not like I'm not going to take that because the tank's knocked out. Of course I'll take it. Thank you. And the artwork would go on the wall. Now, this one just is one of my pet peeves. And you guys, this is one that I genuinely like, yuck. Oh, so much to cover here. All right. First off, my brother did have this when I was a kid. And, of course, I was too young to notice the glaring errors in it. Where to start? Well, let's start off with the World War II M48 Patton tank rolling off of an infantry PA landing craft. Well, let's just start off with the first part of that statement. Let's start off with, oh, look, a Patton tank in World War II. Now, if this was a scene from the movie Patton, where they had to use the Spanish Pattons in the movie Patton as Tigers, and you were to put it in German markings, they go, well, just put a little movie camera in front of it, and it's all accurate. But this, no, not even close. And it actually, yes, this was a diorama kit. It was a diorama kit. But okay, so they use a post-Korean War era tank in World War II. Yeah, okay. But let's just try to move past that. Okay, got the Sherman in the background duking it out with the mysterious German tank, which appears to have been knocked out with the oversized Balkenkreuz on the side of it. Somehow the infantry's just hitting the beach, but it appears they've already managed to line up tons of sea ration boxes and ammo boxes. Then, getting back to our tank friend, we have this big heavy tank roller, which if you had parked it on one of those little LCMs, it would have just sent that thing straight to the bottom. So we have a tank rolling off of an infantry landing craft, not an LST, and it's a, gosh, when did the M48 come out? That was late 50s, early 60s. So this tank's 20 years out of date, ahead of its time. And just to really nitpick it further, all of the American Army infantry, and it was Army that landed at Anzio, are wearing what appear to be very, very post-war camo covers and rubber bands, rubber helmet bands on their helmets, which is the kind of stuff they had when I was in the Army in the 70s. So just wrong on so many levels. But to make the main piece of your artwork a tank that didn't exist for another 20 years, just the irony is, though, is that it did accomplish an important goal, and that was, I think a lot of kids saw that it looked exciting and probably bought it. So whereas it fails on the technical side, it probably did quite well on the sales side, which is really what it was there to do, so you got to give it props for that. Yeah, and it's also very congested looking, and I just don't like it as box. Well, I don't like it as art because it's so wrong in so many ways. But it got kids to buy the kit, so I guess in that regard it was a success. Now, the last one and this is not the only Aurora armor I found that had issues. These are just the ones that we'd be here all day if we picked them all. And, okay, one of these things is not like the other. I'll let you guys start commenting on this one. What looks wrong with this German Tiger 2? Which, by the way, they just call it German Tiger tank, which isn't technically wrong, but it's a King Tiger. So one could make the argument that it's a mislabeled model, but we'll just go past that. Remember, there was no internet back then, and everybody wasn't into the details like they are today. But so my imagination is that turret just wrong, just oversized, and I think too tall. Now, I know it had a huge turret on it for that big long barrel 88 millimeter, but yeah, 20-person turret. That about sums it up. And yeah, everybody's, yep, turret, yep. And to be honest with you, it's kind of an odd position to look at the tank from, too. I'm not sure what they were trying to accomplish with that angle, but that's not a big deal. I had a couple of their other earlier tanks, but I just we'll wind up in the weeds with it. Yeah, way too big. Yep. Yeah, Mark, that's about the way I drew when I was 6 years old. That's right. The irony is it's actually got a pretty good color palette to it. The grays and everything. And shave the top 20% of that turret off, you'd probably have a halfway, oh well. Well, actually, I believe the Tiger 2 had a rear sweep like that on it also. Didn't it? I believe the Tiger 2, and they used that same rear end for the hunting Tiger, only they lengthened it and added another set of wheels. But, well, you guys all nailed that one. Now, I'll quit... yeah. More support, yep. Barrel extend. I'm assuming that's because of the angle you're looking at it from. And, but none of these are the worst of Aurora's stuff. In fact, I'll just jump right to what I think is one of the worst box arts that they put out. Now, Aurora put out a bunch of aircraft in World War II. Now, these are all really early boxes. But for me, well, it's kind of a coin toss. These are some of their worst. Mustangs probably shouldn't be on this list. It's not a great one. But let's start with the Messerschmitt 109. Now, I want you to understand that this is like their very first box art. Okay? So, bear that in mind that this is going back to the 50s. The Zero is the same way. Yeah. I didn't even get a chance to put yeah, you guys are on top of it. Guys, I got to take about a 1-minute break. I'm going to read your comments when I come back. I want you to tell me what you think about these two box arts, bearing in mind that it was the mid-50s. All right. And, but then we're going to go to a couple others. I'm going to be right back. I've written. Sorry about that. Let's see what you guys wrote. Yeah. Battle Tank and a G. Yeah. The Pink Baron and the Lemon Drop Kid. Like a Spanish variant. Happy little. Huh? It does look like it's smiling, doesn't it? I'm off to go attack the French. World War II air race. They just yell, shoot me. If only the enemy had been so kind to paint their planes those colors. Okay. My understanding is, believe it or not, that there actually were some yellow Zeros, but I don't know if they did duty in combat or if they were back in mainland Japan. But I have seen die-cast models of yellow Zeros, so Japanese didn't have a lot of color film back then, so it's hard to tell from black and white photos. I don't know why the 109 has a swept wing, and there's just so much wrong with it, that all the bombs on the wings. But then again, no one had done this before, and but it's. I realize there was no internet. They couldn't just bring up the diagrams and everything they can today, but you would have thought they'd have put more effort into it. But then again, think about, you remember it's the 50s. Most models are still made of wood, and a lot of them don't have any box art. They're just literally a diagram of the airplane or just the name of the airplane. Olin, which later became Lindbergh, they literally just wrote the name of the airplane on the box. They didn't have box art. So, but those you just write off as being okay. But here's the one that drives me up the wall. And by the way, as you may have noticed by the subtext, some of these are pictures from old model kits. Some are from the Box Art Den. I want to thank them for letting me use the pictures. So the top one is I believe the first iteration. And to begin with, the B-26 is in the famous fighter series. The B-26 was a bomber, not a fighter. Okay. That out of the way, anybody noticing just real quick at a glance a couple of things wrong with these two airplanes? Remember, this is World War II. I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure a lack of reference material had a lot to do with it. Well, Sledgemaster depended on which gun the Sherman was using and which where they hit it. Yeah, if you shot with the short 75 at a Tiger on the front, yeah, it was going to glance. But if you had that later 76 long barrel, especially the side, it was made specifically to go through the Tiger, and it could. Yep, everybody's caught it. USAF, you know, Air Force, Air Force. Yeah, the Air Force markings with the red bar in the insignia and the USAF. That was the first thing that leaped out at me, and they held on to that mistake into a later iteration of the box. And somehow I just had a little trouble getting past that. By the way, this kit, though, when it came out, was pretty successful, and apparently it was not only a great seller, but it was kind of expensive. I think it was like $1.50 or something when it came out, but it sold very well. And this Mustang isn't really that bad, but it's part of the 12 o'clock high series, and again, aside from being riddled with bullet holes, which could happen, and the profile looking a little bit off, you'll notice, again, Air Force markings, even though they're selling it as a World War II 12 o'clock high escort fighter. And, I mean, could you have gone to the library? Decam, I don't think they were done by aviation artists. I agree. I think they were done by, they could have been in-house artists or just a local shop that they dealt with. But even as the 60s rolled around, they were still making some mistakes. And what I'm about to show you next goes right into what some of the things that Mike had been telling me. And this is their Cobra helicopter from Aurora. And again, the kits are okay. I'm not picking on, this is strictly about the box art. And I believe this is the first one. This is when they went to the big boxes. But just at a quick glance, when I first saw this, I almost didn't buy the kit because I thought they'd gotten the helicopter wrong. I'm like, I know a Cobra, and a Cobra has a chin turret, and there's no chin turret on this. And then I realized what happened was the chin turret, which had gotten, the lines had gotten mixed up with the sponsons and the fuselage. They put this really bright underbelly reflective light on it, which makes you think that's the entire underside of the helicopter. But when you look closer, you realize, oh, there is a chin turret here. But wait a minute. He's got a machine gun up in the nose that's firing, which the Cobra did not have. And everything was off. The skids are too big. The sponsons are with the ordnance on them's too big. I don't know what kind of ordnance that's supposed to be. And just everything about this was off, including the fictitious nose gun. And as a kid, I knew enough about models to know that wasn't right. And it just really turned me off. I think I just put the box down and went to the next one. And exactly, it makes it look like the fuselage has this bow to it. It's just not. And the thing is, the kit's actually fairly accurate. They'd have been better off if they had painted it based on the kit. But it's not perfectly accurate. It's just better than the box art. Well, when they went to and I think this was when Diker took over, they went to the big boxes. Even in profile, that's not right. But same thing, they did it again. They buried the chin where it doesn't stand out enough to show that there is a chin turret, and they put the gun in the nose again that doesn't exist. And it's just wrong. There's just a lot technically wrong with this drawing. It doesn't look good. It doesn't make me want to buy the kit. And they kind of broke all I wouldn't say there were any rules, but the rules we're inventing today. I think they broke a lot of rules with the Cobra kit. It just, I imagine it probably sold pretty well because the Cobra was a popular modeling subject, but especially at any kind of distance at all, it just looks wrong at a glance. And you've got to grab them at a glance because the kids are going to be looking at a lot of models while they're in there. Just read some of the comments here. Yeah. This is one of those times they might have been better off to have someone do a nice job of building the model and just used a photo of the model. Yeah, these kits were made by Aurora up in West Hempstead. And West Hempstead, New York. And I need to get up, speaking of which, I need to get up with Andy, see if we're ready to do another Aurora files at some point. That's true. You know, a lot of kids, not everybody gets grabbed by the box art. Sometimes people want a specific subject matter, or they just look at it and go, cool. They don't care. I want the Cobra. I'm buying the Cobra. And somebody, I think, sent me one of these old Aurora Cobras a while back in a bag with just missing the canopy to it. I think. Gosh, I'm losing track. Now, one last pick on Aurora's. Again, we're not picking on Aurora. We're just picking on some of the box art. Now, this is not bad. There's nothing wrong with this Avro CF100. My only complaint with this, it's good artwork, is just that the decision not to show the entire airplane. Now, I know Jack Linwood was famous for his cram the box, because like he said, nobody wants to see wingtips. But you're missing the whole tail in this thing, which is a big part of the outline of the aircraft. Yes, you have the other one banking away, so you can get a little bit of a look at the tail, but the guy's canopy goes up near the guy's tail, which causes kind of a congestion spot, and the whole thing just, it's if you could back out a little bit and move that other airplane off a little bit, you'd have a really nice box art. But it, again, doesn't really make me want to buy the airplane or buy the model, and I feel like there's just something missing. There may have been something on the side panel. And the one at the bottom, the pilot has tiny feet. Yeah, okay. Let's take a look at let's take a look at this real quick. I'm going to blow this up a little bit Again, not any complaint with the artwork, just felt like cutting off the back quarter of the airplane. Now this is the United States Air Force pilot. Now this is actually a photograph of the built model, which was also the Steve Canyon model, which, by the way, I'd love to have one. And it's actually a pretty good kit. The feet do look a little small, but he's got a big helmet on and everything. But this, the only thing I was going to poke at this isn't really a bad box art, because first off, that's a photograph. But it's superimposed. It says United States Air Force pilot. Now, I only know this because I have the kit. But in the background's a Navy FA Crusader. They superimposed him against their existing artwork of their big Navy FA Crusader, which you can see the nose of the other one just above his head. And I just thought it was kind of funny that it actually says United States Air Force pilot, and then, of course, they put him in front of a naval aircraft. Of course, you can't see where it says Navy, and it's not a big deal. I just thought that was kind of funny. And you've really got to be a model nerd or an airplane nerd to catch that. But I have that F8, which has the cover artwork of them pulling the engine out of the airplane while another one streaks overhead, because the model came with an engine. They were trying to showcase that. In this case, they just position their built-up model or superimpose it on that artwork. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys, you got plenty of Air Force jets, but this one happened to be parked on the ramp, which is what they needed, and had the big American star, which is probably they picked it and they cropped it down. No one will notice or no one will care. And no one really does care. I just thought that was kind of fun to poke a little fun at. Oh, Larry, I'm through Daytona every time I go to work because I drive from Jacksonville to Orlando. Now, you guys, now to pick on another company, I found this one not the most horrific artwork out there. This is from the company Starfix, and the artwork's actually better than the airplane. But we can look at this and just see a lot of things wrong here. This just isn't high quality artwork. The B-17s in the background look. It just doesn't look good. It's not horrible like some stuff, but it's just. Of course, Starfix was a real budget operation, and they eventually went to using photographs of their models. But what scale was? I think it was. I don't know. Probably box scale. Hang on, give me just a second, and I think I can answer that real quick. (1 to 67) scale. And by the way, those things go on eBay for about $64. Wow. That ain't cheap. I remember that being $1 kit. The bulges in front of the canopy went to, I think it was the MG-151 autocannons. Basically 50 calibers. The original Messerschmitts had 7.7 millimeter guns in the cowling, the E models. And once they realized they had to go to heavier caliber, they put, I think it was 13.5 millimeter or something, I forget what the exact size was, cannons, but the receiver and the ammo trays and everything wouldn't fit on the cowling, so they put those bulges on there. And the 109 was really kept in production too long. They kept trying to improve it, and they did, but it was really struggling to stay up with newer designs. And so later models, you see all kinds of bulges and adapters on them as they try to make them, adapt to the changing war environment they were operating in. And certain versions fired a cannon to the nose, and some models had cannons in the wings, and some models had cannons under the wings. That airplane, God, there must have been 40 different iterations. I mean, I know there were only 7 or 8 major models, but including subtypes, there were probably 40 different variants of that airplane. You remember, it was around before the war, and they were still in operation to the last day and served with other countries after the war. It's got one of the longest service lives of any aircraft of that era. And partly because of how early it started. Oh, it's a copy of the Airfix? Okay, well, that makes sense. So, I wanted to throw that one up there just because it was one of the Lulus that I found. And believe me, there are plenty of kits I did not put up here that had, were definite candidates. Der Gustav. This company do on the I don't think so. Starfix was out of Israel, and I think it's one of only two model companies that ever came out of Israel. And in their defense, they were really operating with limited equipment and tight budgets and a limited skill set. They didn't have the manpower reserves to draw on that a lot of companies in Japan and the U.S. do. But I thought that one was worth pointing out. Now, no, did they? Okay, well, plastics is plastics, whatever sells. Now, the next one I'm going to go to is not bad art. I did a bio on Shigeo Kaoki, who is a Japanese artist. He did this one for Hasegawa, and of course he gave them what they asked for. He stopped doing these action scenes after a while, and he does some incredible art. But this one, to put it in a nutshell, I just don't like it. There's, to my eye, don't get me wrong, the airplanes are nicely rendered in that their proportions are correct. He's very meticulous about that. I think what I don't like about it is just the gray and green on the orangey yellow background. It's something about it. I think it's the color palette. Also, I think he missed an opportunity. If he had number 7 there, doing like a left bank and breaking away where you could get a look at those long, elegant wings that version of the Focke-Wulf had, you could have added a lot to this. But I seriously doubt in combat like that, these guys would be flying that close together, and especially without looking at each other. But more than anything else, I think it's just the color palette, something about it. Well, these are the later models. What was was it the Door or the TA-154s? I think is what they call them. Believe it or not, that's actually an inline engine. Same thing that was on the Junkers 88, but it has a circular radiator, so they put a round nacelle on it, and they put a fuselage extension in the tail, just in front of the tail, to counterbalance the long engine. That was a wartime necessity because they couldn't make enough of the DB600 series, 01s and 05s. But I think it is supposed to be the Palesti rate, I believe. But still, that should be mostly smoke in the background. I mean, like black and gray. But there's just something about this color palette. It doesn't make me want to buy the model. And here you've got two airplanes, both in profile view, so I think there's a squandered opportunity to show two views of the airplane. Again, these are my humble opinions. Even if the guy on the left was just in a 25, 30-degree bank, it would add so much. You may be turning away a little bit, it would add something more to it. Right here, I feel like I'm getting two of the same, and that orange just doesn't do it for me. The yellow flames down at the bottom and everything, but here you've got the B-24 that's clearly flamed, but there's no black smoke coming off it. It's just big orange flame, which I suppose, depending on what was burning, that could be the case. But the yellow and the orange, yeah, they're definitely too close together. But I realize it's just artwork, but when Linwood would take shortcuts and do things, it was always with something in mind. I'm not seeing anything being gained by having these two guys in this formation. And the thing is that Koike, God, I hope I'm saying his name right. Who I believe still doing art. He's a fantastic artist. In fact, when this is done, you can put in shigeokaoki.com and go to his website, and he's got just, man, does beautiful. He does all kinds of airliners and these beautiful artists. Does beautiful art, and I would add that his bio points this out a little bit. Mike and I talked about this. Although some of these artists, like the famous Jack Linwood, worked for Northrop, and he actually had a full-time day job working for Northrop and did his contract work on the side until Revell hired him away. But a lot of these guys, they live gig to gig. I mean, it's paycheck, when work comes. A lot of people do some of this artwork, truly are the starving artist. And so there's kind of a halfway old joke in the art community about if you want to eat at an artist, make sure to marry a wife with a good day job. Or if you're a girl, marry a guy with a day. The point is that you may have to depend on your spouse's income for regular money. But then again, the starving artist is a bit of a cliche. Now, to jump on to a really, really, really crappy piece of artwork. Remember, this isn't bad. The only reason I put this one up here, because it's beautiful workmanship, is only because the color palette and the decisions, it doesn't make me want to buy the model. But you want to see some artwork that I would look at and say, if the artwork's this bad, there's no way I'm buying the model. Check out this jewel. Model du Montazu for the USS, or the Columbia Space Shuttle. I'm sure it could get worse, but I don't know how. I'm just going to say it. I could draw a better shuttle than that. You know what? I'm just going to wait to see what you guys have to say, because this actually almost leaves me speechless. Yeah, Kenneth, I think you just summed it up. Oh, that's not a Buran. That's Columbia, and yeah, that land. Yeah, Sarah Jane, you're right. That Lancaster is magnificent. Roy Cross, who did a lot of the stuff for most of the stuff for Airfix, just a fantastic work. You're right, Adam. It literally does look like an. In fact, I'm almost inclined to give you guys a challenge. Every one of you draw a picture of the Columbia and send it to the next viewer's builds, and I can put up against this and but we're model builders, not artists. But still, I'll bet you everyone the pierogi shovel. I'll bet you everyone watching this right now, if you took your time, could do a better one. That I just don't get it. I think, although we got some Lulus to look at, I think this may be the worst one, and we still have a couple of winners. But I saw that and I was like, at first I thought it was a joke, and maybe somebody let their kid do it. Ken, it was bring your kid to work day. May have been. Model du Montazu. You know what? I didn't think to look that up. Let me just. I just thought I would look up Model du Montazu and see where they're from. And that may not be the name of the company. I think that means something else because of all the hits I'm getting. Somebody in here speak Romanian or Russian. Prom Kozmizinzi. Oh God, I can't do that. Komisizny. CEO of the company that made this, if this thing sells, you are fired. Yeah, they did miss the machine gun in that. It does look like it's from a coloring book, and I'll bet you that was done with some kind of chalks or crayons or something. I just don't. Yeah, we could spend all day picking this one apart, but this is the low-hanging fruit. I mean, I saw that, and I was like, okay, that's just too easy. All right, now let's look at a serious one. Now, remember I was talking about Dragon. They started in the mid-90s. Once kit model box art was an established thing. Well, let's look at some of their early artwork. And, of course, your eye probably goes immediately to that BF-110. But here's just some first-generation trumpeter stuff. And we'll go over these, but oh, these aren't the only ones. Okay, This Messerschmitt 110 is almost as bad as that space shuttle. I mean, really. Where to begin? Fuselage too big, wings too small. Oh God, we just be here. And this is Trumpeter. Now, you can go, well, it's their 1 to 144 scale one. Yeah, but the box art is still box art. Oh, okay. Prompt comes, it probably means something like space shuttle or space transporter, something like that. Yeah, that would make sense. You know, if the model is as bad as the artwork, I would buy it just to make a parody model out of it, like some of those the Woozies or those monogram, Snoopy and Woodstock kind of things, or the little Red Baron stuff. I mean, that's just, oh boy. And well, let's just keep going as long as we're on it. Then you've got this MiG 29, and again, just so we make airplanes out of bananas. Paint that thing yellow and put some little minions in it. Banana! Well, that's true, Slugo, but the GB was a funny looking airplane. These are funny looking paintings of airplanes that really aren't that funny looking, but fair enough. In fact, the first time I saw a picture of the GB that didn't have the little bit of rudder sticking up, it just flushed back, I thought I was like, you're joking, right? Oh, we've got an Academy. It's coming. Don't worry. Yes, Ved, I have an Academy one. I'm saving that one. Uh, you're right, Adam. Yeah, when Mike Machat was 10 years old, his artwork was better than this. Now, this one, believe it or not, despite how weird the outline looks, although I think the tail appears a little wrong, but that crooked wing actually is accurate to the F7, which is a Chinese copy of a Russian jet. But with me, the problem with this is more the color palette. It's just it looks like a cartoon, and the actual outline of the airplane isn't that horrendous. Although I think the tail's wrong. But at first I thought they'd messed up the wing. I went and looked at some reference photos, and they actually got the wing fairly correct. It looks like it's swooped down, but that's an optical illusion because the trailing edge cuts in, and the weird shape. It actually, in the photos, it has that look. But it's the colors. Now, we get over here. Here are some ones that are in dire need of attention. Let me blow these up. Okay. We have Dash Beagle. It's a Chinese copy of the Russian, what was it, IL-28, I think, the Beagle. It's just wrong. It's just engines and everything. The F-22, too short, canopy's too big. The F-18 down there, the same thing. F-16's completely off. The only real problem I had with the ship was just that it's like it's sailing the Great Margarita Sea. It was more of color choices, but the airplanes here, they're just pretty ruddy bad. Just read some. The Smear one. Oh, Smear was a company. There were some ones by Smear that I had seen that I forgot what company it was. It was Smear. They're almost as bad as that space shuttle. Sailing a ship in antifreeze. Oh gosh. You know what? Hang on real quick. I'm just gonna, while we're talking here live, I'm just going to see what I can see real quick. Because Smear got a lot better as time went by. I knew some of their early stuff was pretty bad, but now it's pretty good. I'm just gonna take let me see if I can real quick. There was one, I think it was a Tempest or a Typhoon that I saw that really, you're like, was the person sober when they did this? great. Now, if you go to, let's see if this works. Huh. Well, I tried to put smear into Scalemates, and it kept taking me to the smirch. But anyway, yeah, there were a couple of real Lulus in there. Ectoplasm. We're in the great, he slimed the whole fleet. But you were talking about Academy, and this one is just funny. Let me see. Where is it? Okay, there's the jets. There's those Yakapucks. We'll get to you in a second. Okay, where is that? I had saved. Okay. Well, you know what? Well, you guys poke fun at that. I'm going to create a real fast little card here to pop up. Let's see, where is he? You can run, but you cannot hide. Oh, we still almost forgot about those. Yeah, we still got a few others to cover. Ah, there he is. Just tuck that in right here. Image. Here we go. That is supposed to be a serious piece of artwork. And Academy's not some little underfunded company either. I mean, they've been doing this long enough to know what they're doing. What? Why, Grandma, what itty bitty little wheels you have. But hey, it includes the Kettentrad. And you thought the real Messerschmitt was scary to land on its spindly little landing gears. I think that's how a Messerschmitt pilot actually saw the airplane. My God, where to begin with this thing? It's like how you see something when you put it right to the tip of your nose. Yeah. I actually did see an RRC airplane that looked a little bit like that, and you can imagine how the landing went. Is there a minion in the cockpit? Probably. Oh my gosh. I mean, the more I look at this, it's like, It's like that painting of Kramer and Seinfeld. It's like it's so terrible I can't stand it, but I can't look away. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? So much wrong with that. Let's look at one of the other the bulb. You know, it's almost just perverted enough to make me want to do that, to put 148 wings and landing gear, maybe 172nd scale landing gear, 148 scale wings on a 132nd scale fuselage. Oh, you're gonna need a lot of putty. I think I know what the Kettentrad's for. Klaus, quick, my wheels, they are too small, get under me. Well, it depends on which. The 109s are strut supported up to, I forget which model, one of the later models, the K model, or one of them, they got rid of it. Yeah, I tell you what, you'd be better off to belly that thing in. But, let me show you a couple of trumpeters. Oh, we already saw those. I actually have this model, by the way. The model's every bit as bad as the Art 2. That is the the Chinese FT5, which is their copy of a MiG-17 two-seat trainer. Well, excuse me, a MiG-17. The Russians did not make a a two-seat MiG-17. The Chinese, the Russians used the MiG-15 UTI, and when the Chinese got the 17, they decided to engineer their own two-seat version. So this is a domestic airplane based on a Russian design, and I have the model, and the model's meh. It's not terrible, but it certainly has its issues. Made of kind of a weird plastic. I think I talked about it last time. But the box art, it looks like somebody literally screwed. It looks like a Weeble Wobbler, a Fisher Price toy. Somebody screwed wings on a barrel. GB on trucks, yeah. That's their aerobatic team, which is why it has the brilliant colors. I put mine in the standard silver. A couple of countries bought it. I know the Albanians had a bunch of them, and they were actually flying them until not that long ago. But, well, I say not that long ago. I guess until after the wall came down, they ran out of money. Bass lure with wings. That's pretty. A basking shark. That's what we should call it, the basking shark. Now, the model came with 2 or 3 different noses, and one was kind of big, but nothing like this. I mean, this is, again, just horrible artwork. And those are PLAF, People's Liberation Army Air Force China, Red Communist China. I actually had to order aftermarket decals for it because I wanted to put mine in, because it came with, I think I had to order aftermarket decals. I think no, wait a minute. No, the decals would have had to come with it because it was a Chinese airplane. The Russians never had it. So, yeah, I guess the decals did come with it. Or, for some reason, I seem to think I ordered aftermarket decals. Maybe they'd gone bad or something. And although this one isn't nearly as bad, here we have the F-86 to chase it. This just has, to me, the problem with this one is it's just the canopy's too bulbous. It's not the world's worst artwork, but, I mean, come on. That's one of the reasons, that's from Kinetic. And one of the reasons that that the artwork is so important is you're figuring, well, if the artwork's bad, then the kit's probably not any better. So aside from grabbing people's attention and wanting to make them own the subject matter, and Kinetic may very well make a perfectly good kit, but if the artwork looks a little weird, then or subpar, then it just makes you wonder about the quality of the rest of the kit. And that's just wrong. You're right. I didn't even notice that drop tape doesn't look too good either. One of the things, from certain angles, something can look wrong, even like in a photograph, depending on how the light reflects and everything. And one of the things I really liked about Jack Linwood's philosophy is he would just change it till it looked right. Didn't care if it was inaccurate as long as it looked right. And I agree with him because, again, you're trying to make it look cool. You're trying to make it desirable. And one of the things about this one is that they put this right behind the canopy. Yeah, I don't know if it's supposed to be reflection of light or speed streak or whatever, but there's this white mist across the top of the fuselage. And it just, I don't know, it seems to be like there's a little bit of a glow around the entire airplane. Somehow it just doesn't quite get it for me. And the color palettes of the land behind it are so washed that the airplane doesn't, I don't know, the whole thing just lacks a certain pop. And I don't want to say it's bad artwork. It's just it doesn't, you know, it just doesn't thrill me. I thought I heard something behind me. No, it's not. Oh my God, is it benign or is it benign or malignant? Oh man, wicked. Oh, I forgot I have a whole water right here. Oh, well. Now we're going to do a slight shift gears to some good artwork, and we're going to talk about something that you guys enlightened me of. And this is really cool. Okay. Of course, this is the comp that Jack Linwood did that Mike gave me. And it was used on this box art. Originally 1963 in the British release of the SE5A, and then in 64 in the American release. Now, there's something about this artwork that I didn't know, and several of you guys informed me of. If you'll notice behind him, there is a white Fokker D7. And in keeping with the idea, and this is just the kind of thing that Linwood would do, and in keeping with the idea of a certain continuity, creating a certain universe, that white D7 in these images is actually the Revell D7 from that series, which is Hermann Goering's airplane from the First World War. Huh, thanks, W. So the story that is being told in the comp, which is the story that is being told in the box art, is in the same universe as the rest of the Revell 1/72nd scale World War I aircraft, because that's the same white D7 in its own box art down on the bottom. So Jack was keeping it all within the Jack Linwood Revell 1/72nd World War I universe. Yeah, what it is, Smitty, is the artist would do a comp, which is about that big. Okay, do it in gouaches and watercolor, which is a type of watercolor, and it once they had worked out with the art director, and it was Howard Goldstein was the art director. Then he told Jack what they wanted, and once they worked it out, Jack painted the comp, which is short for composite. Comp was it composite? Oh gosh, Mike just told me this, and I'm composite. And what you would do is you would take that to them and say, okay, this is what it's going to look like. So they now have a full color piece of artwork that gives them an idea what the box is going to look like. But it's not finished product. It's, for lack of a better phrase, quick and dirty. Although Jack could do them quick, there's nothing dirty about it. It's beautifully clean. So they said, okay, this is approved. And on the back, it's got Goldstein's name, which, okay, this is approved. This is going to be the box art. Now, using the comp, Jack goes back to his studio and does the big painting that becomes the box art that you see in the second picture. And the comps, a bunch of them somehow wound up getting saved, and I believe Craig Cadera got a couple of them and somehow probably bought them. And Mike had several of these comps that were done by Linwood and Kashadi, and I was shocked. He offered me one, and he was like, "Well, you know, you've helped promote the channel and everything, so pick one." I was like, "Oh, one? How much you want for the lot? What pictures?" But and I would have gladly taken any of them. The one reason that I picked the SE5, other than I've always loved that airplane, was that not 5 minutes before we'd been talking, I'd said if I was a squadron commander in the First World War and I had to pick one type of aircraft for my squadron, and on the RAF side, I would have picked the SE5A. I would have picked it over the Newports or the Sopwith or the Spads, and there's a litany of reasons why. But I had, so when I was going through them, he said you could have one. I kind of naturally gravitated back to the SE5A just because we'd just been talking about it, and I really love the pose on that airplane. That's a pose, and so yes, and I can't believe I have a Linwood original. And it's a comp, not the big artwork, but still, I'm thrilled. You have to be really careful with these things though, because the gouache these things are 60 something years old, and let's see, this is 58 years old, and it's they can't take UV, and they can't get them wet. They're water based paint. No matter how old they get, you can always damage them. I've got it with the vellum tissue over it in my light box, all the lights turned off, where it's safe until we can get it shadow boxed. But one of the things that Mike asked me was, he goes, "Do you see a story here?" Because good box art tells a story. And here's the story as I see it. All right. Let me blow this up big here. Now, clearly this pilot is unaware that there's a white Goering is right behind him, but you'll notice the pilot is looking towards you, but he's looking down a little bit, and he's flying. He's in a slight climb, but he doesn't appear to be maneuvering hard. His elevator is tilted up just a little bit. And by the way, those don't know, Jack Linwood, the artist who did this, was also a World War II flight instructor. He was rated in P-38s and in Mustangs and a couple other fighters, and he was a fighter instructor. I think he was a civilian fighter instructor, so he knew aviation inside out. He actually had his own AT-6 that he got for like $800 after the war. So it helped because he nailed all the little details. So you notice the elevator's deflected slightly up, so the SE5 is in a climb, but the guy's looking down. Given his rather relaxed look, I assume he sees an SE5 chasing a German aircraft. Well, you look at Goering's airplane behind him. Goering is too close to get a shooting solution. Even if he pulled back on the stick all the way, he'd still wind up going under him because he's up there at super high speed. I mean, nose down, probably doing 150, 160 miles an hour. And I think what you can't see just from reading this picture is that this SE5 pilot is probably backing up another SE5 that's down there about to shoot at a German, and Goering is trying to race down there to get that guy off his tail, maybe even shoot him down. So a couple of seconds from now, when Goering goes swooping under this guy and attacks the other SE5, the other British aircraft, this guy's going to make a hard left and roll it into a dive to go after Goering. We all know Goering survived the war, so he's not going to get him. But I derived all that from this picture, which means this picture tells a story. It's captivating. You want to know what's going to happen next. And that makes you buy the model. That is the real gift of artists like Linwood and Kashadi and Amendola and Steele and the rest of them, and so many others. Oh, I'm sorry. I moved away from the microphone. I'm sorry, guys. Here, I'll turn the volume up just a little bit right here. Kind of getting lost in my own thoughts there. I'm not sure if I was talking to you guys or talking to myself there. You know, I kind of think the same thing. Of course, Kelly, I agree with you. I think it is. But, of course, you know, when you have something like, oh, well, of course, mine's the best. But, that's the way I read it. And, You know, it's funny. When I hold this thing in my hands and just look at it, and of course I just use my fingertips from underneath and look at it. As much as I love the imagery, and I do love the imagery, I just can't get over, the hands that made it, so to speak. That this is not a simulation. This is a real piece of the original stuff made by the master himself. And one of the things, I know it's weird, the first thing, Mike just grinned and laughed, and because as soon as I got it for the first picture, for the first thing I did, I don't know what, I had to smell it, and I 1964. This artwork would have been done in 62 or 63, so that means I was about 1 year old when this was made. No matter where I was, no matter what I was doing, this piece of, after I got out of diapers, this piece of artwork was somewhere waiting on me. It's finally come home. No, that's true. And one other little thing that I thought was kind of interesting was, because we talked about a lot about art while we were there, and guys like Ferris, who we talked about earlier, he would tell you, okay, there's 28 ribs on each wing, so he would, mark out exactly, properly spaced, properly shaded, and all that stuff. And Jack, who remember, Jack didn't consider himself an artist, he considered himself an illustrator. And he would just sit there and you doing 28? I don't know. It looks good. And that's what sells the model. Werner Voss, in my opinion, the best World War I pilot. What say you, Max? Okay. I'm going to quasi-agree with that with a caveat. I also throw in there Ernst Udet, Mick Manick, and probably Billy Bishop. The reason that I throw a caveat in there is there's a point at which you get so good at what you're doing that there isn't any measurable skill difference, and on any given day, one guy would beat the other. You could put Billy Bishop, Mick Manick, Ernst Udet, and Werner Voss, the 2-on-2, every day at noon, and every day come up with, one of the permutation, one of 16 different results. Some days they're going to get him, some days he's going to get them. It just, but absolutely one of the finest. Believe it or not, one of the people who was not that great a pilot was the Baron von Richthofen, but he was an excellent hunter and a very smart tactician. When I say he wasn't one of the greatest pilots, I mean, he wasn't one of the most fantastic stick and rudder man. I guarantee you someone like Voss or Udet would have flown rings around him. But he was very careful, and he was a good hunter, and he was an excellent marksman. Von Richthofen, I got to be careful how I say this, or I sound like your typical internet jerk. I don't want to say he was overrated, because in the end, success is what matters. So he's worthy of every bit of the praise he has received. Here's where people get a little lost in the weeds on these things. Their job is to go up and shoot down the enemy. Who was the best pilot and who had the most kills are not necessarily the same thing. Let me explain. There's no time. I sum up. For all we know, the hottest stick that ever flew got stuck as an instructor pilot. That's kind of the storyline behind the great Waldo Pepper. Waldo, you're one of the best pilots I've ever saw. If the war had gone on a little longer, you might have had a chance to prove it. Or was in a quiet sector where there were no enemy pilots or enemy aviation. The reason these guys racked up the kills they did was because they were where they needed to be. So that's part of the equation. Of course, they also had the skill set. Then there's the equipment difference. And you guys may remember the Fokker Scourge for a couple of months when the Eindeckers were chewing up the British left and right because they had the interrupter gear. And Leno Hawker was apparently a great pilot, but he had a crappy airplane. Even Baron von Richthofen, who I think it was Richthofen that killed him, made the comment at one point that Leno Hawker was the finest pilot he ever went up against, and had he had a better plane, it probably would have turned out differently. But I think the Baron was flying an Albatross, and Hawker was flying something like a DH-4 Airco or something, a pusher, and he just couldn't. As they said in the Hunt for Red October, sorry, sir, the Alpha's just too quick for him. There's only so much difference you can make with good tactics and good. At some point, you've got to have enough of a technological edge to keep pace. Slugo, you're right. I was very fortunate as a kid to meet a man named Dale Titler who wrote the book The Day the Red Baron Died. And I'm not mistaken, Tytler was the one who started popularizing what is now more or less the accepted fact that it was probably Australian ground gunners that got the Red Baron. Most likely, an Australian sergeant named Cedric Poppin. We'll never know for sure. There'll always be doubt. And I'm not trying to take away from Roy Brown, but in a way, I think part of the Baron's mystique is that nobody is sure who got him, and that it's like what happened to Amelia Earhart or Judge Crater. You know, these things are the fact that we don't know kind of makes them bigger than life, even in death. And but the Baron was a very careful tactician. He had a couple of rules. He'd flown under Oswald Belka, and Belka had who was killed in a midair. And Belka had racked up like 13 kills on a 9-decker, so he was using a very marginal airplane. But they still have Belka's dicta to this day, which is get the sun behind you, gain altitude, all the what we call the rules for fighter pilots, basically. The Baron had a couple of rules that he never broke. He never got off alone. He never got down low. He never got behind enemy territory. A lot of times, what he would do is the Yasta, the squadron, would attack. And he'd be up there orbiting around, and he would find one that was damaged or got off by itself and go in and make the kill. He was an avid hunter and an expert shot, and he would get in close. Often didn't. That's what he had in common with the French ace René Fonck. Fonck, although apparently, from what I've read, a hard guy to get along with, was an excellent pilot, and Fonck was also an excellent marksman. And Fonck got in real close, and he was known to shoot down enemy aircraft with only half a dozen rounds, just one burst and shot placement. And Belka and Immelman were, I don't know, was it Belka was killed in midair? Or, yeah, it was Belka, or was it Immelman? And neither one of them survived the war. Immelman invented the Immelman maneuver, which is still called an Immelman today. That's where you do a half loop and then roll out at the top, and it was a great way to reverse yourself. The Eindecker could do it. It was early in the war. It was hard for planes to keep up. It's a common to this day. It's still called the Immelman. And reverse Immelmans where you do the same thing, roll inverted and go down and that. Anyway, so all this was new back then. But when the Baron did get himself killed, he broke all of his own rules. He was behind enemy lines. He'd gotten down low, and he's off by himself. And apparently, he just got target fixation going after a young Canadian lieutenant named WWII, who was a personal friend of Brown, which is why Brown was chasing him. Brown saw that his buddy was in trouble and basically was going out to save him. And according to Tytler, and Tytler had been in communication with the Baron's mother, who lived to a very ripe old age, very much the German aristocrat. And but apparently WWII gets in the dogfight, expends his ammunition, doesn't hit anything, then runs for home. Turns around, sees a red triplane behind him. The Baron sees a Sopwith going off by itself, and there's my kill for the day. And the one advantage that Sopwith had was a little faster. The triplane was highly maneuverable and had excellent climb. It didn't have really good visibility. Those three big wings really blocked a lot of your view. Also, don't forget it had that quarter wing between the wheels too. So it was a pretty even though it didn't have any strut bracing. If you notice, there's no cables on a triplane, or very few. It's mostly just those big struts, and was originally designed without those. But there was no way the German Air Ministry was going to let them fly an airplane that didn't have some kind of big struts on it. So anyway, he goes diving after WWII. WWII turns around, sees this red triplane behind him, knows exactly who it is, and just starts gyrating, which is about all he can do. And you've got two airplanes that are both extremely agile. So apparently every time, the Baron tried to try to get him in his sights and squirt a burst, but May was, was maneuvering for his life. And he finally, Roy Brown's up there, and apparently another, an American, I think, named WWII, a French name, but he was an American, I believe. Could have been a Canadian, but he was up high and looked down, and he saw Brown go after the Red Baron, so he started to follow. And I didn't find this, and you rarely find this WWII's story mentioned anywhere, and I don't know why. I don't know, but I found it in one source, and it seemed to be credible. But anyway, when Brown saw his buddy getting chased, he dives after him, and he goes screaming down. At this point, they've moved across no man's land, and the Baron apparently just had target fixation, which is a big no-no. He's just so focused on getting this guy. To be honest, I think he was getting frustrated. Who was this little guy that keeps, it's like Darth Vader, and Luke Skywalker, and you just can't, the Force is strong with this one, and apparently Brown had built up a lot of big head of steam coming down, and he just opens up with those 303s, and witnesses on the ground said they saw pieces of the Baron's airplane flittering off. So Brown hit him, and he dumped about 40 rounds into the airplane. But he had built up so much speed that he just passed by and pulled up and just slingshot it up. And of course, Wap May just headed for home. And then Brown comes back around. Well, just after, and we're talking a couple of seconds after Brown makes his pass, the Baron goes over the trenches, and two sets of machine gunners open up on him. And Cedric Poppins manning one set of guns, and then it might have been a twin 30 mount or 303 mount, and then another single gun was firing at him. So he had two or three guns shooting at him. He went right through the crossfire. After that is when Boots Le Batoyer said that after he saw the Aussie shoot at him, that's when the airplane started to wobble and do this and went into the ground and folded up the landing gear on it, but it basically crashed in one piece. And they everyone knew who that red triplane. Everybody knew who it was, so it wasn't long before all the GIs are up there ripping pieces off the airplane for souvenirs, and they had to restore order. And they took his body, and they found a 303 hole, and I want to say it was in any Audi. But the problem was no one knew, because the angle, was it going up or coming down, because the angle Brown hit at and the angle the gun shot through were basically reciprocal trajectories. And I think one of them went through his leg also. So they'll never know, was the bullet going north or south, up or down when this happened. And Brown took credit for it. Poppin tried to take credit for it, but a Royal Air Force, he was Canadian, but still flighting for the RAF. The captain flying the fighter plane was considered to have the stronger claim than the sergeant on the ground, and that's the way history printed it for a long time. But eventually, Poppin started I guess in the 70s or 80s or 60s, I guess, when Titler did his book. There'd always been this group of people that thought it had been Poppin, and that actually got some subtraction after Titler's book, I think. And then now it's still debated hotly to this day. Nobody knows. I guess in the long run, it doesn't really matter. And the Australians did give him a field burial with all, the ceremony, and that goes with the burying of an officer. And the reason was, you have to remember, the Baron was very well respected by both sides. Even though he was the enemy, he was the honorable enemy. And as brutal as the First World War was, at least occasionally there was still some chivalry. And it's one of the things I like about the Blue Max is, the captain played by, his name I'm losing, I can see his face. Anyway, he's like, he wants to fight the war of chivalry, but Stockel had been in the trenches for 2 years. Chivalry to him was a joke because he'd been down getting shelled by artillery and bayoneting people, and kind of the different approaches. But also, I think the Australians were keenly aware that the eyes of the world were upon them for this also. And it may have just been a show, but it was the right way to handle that situation. Both the Baron's brothers are pilots, and they one of them, I think, was killed shortly after the war flying with an early airline, and I think it was Wolfram von Richthofen. Went on to be a general in Hitler's Luftwaffe. George Papard, that's right. Love the Blue Max. That Fowls that they used, they actually built that for the movie. It's still flying. I think it's in New Zealand. Um, and that airplane, that Maureen Solner parasol plane that he flew, that was supposed to be like their stand-in for a Fokker D8. Papard actually bought that aircraft after the movie and owned it for some time, and it's still flying too. But the Baron was, every country, every generation, they need their heroes. And for World War I Germany, Baron von Richthofen, especially the fact that he was killed, so he could never later do anything embarrassing. He was their national hero, their Lord Nelson, and because God knows people that had it up to here with the Kaiser. I should read some of these comments. Yes, Baron von Richthofen did get a head wound, which changed his personality. He had constant headaches after that. Ironically, he was not attacking a fighter plane. He was attacking what they call a gun bus, which I think was a farm, but it had frigging guns all over it. It was a single engine plane, but had like forward-facing side, one on a stand that could shoot over the prop in the rear. And apparently, that's the one that hit him. He was attacking from the rear, and the gunner had to stand up, man the gun. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, he was standing in front of the pilot. Stand up and man the gun. I'm gonna guess there were no straps. And he managed to skitter one across his skull. Yeah, wars, each side needs their heroes. And by the way, trivia, I have one hanging up in the room, and I can't get it because it's nailed to the wall, but I actually have a replica Blue Max medal. And if you ever notice, the Blue Max has the script on it is in French. It has the King Frederick F on it, and it says pour le mérite, for merit. And you're like, why would a German medal have a French script on it? That is because in the days of King Frederick and the like, French was the official language of the Prussian court. That's how they separate themselves from the commoners. Yeah, I imagine they did move his grave a few times because souvenir hunters are going to go after anything. But, one of the toughest things that happened to a lot of one of the problems that a lot of these heroes have, and I hate the way we throw that word around these days, but one of the problems they have is that wars are won largely by money and morale. And people love heroes. They, someone, hey, look at the great job they did. If he can do it, I can do it, and maybe I can survive this thing. So they tend to promote their, to show their hero. Not every society did it though. I'm really not sure how the Japanese handled this, because my understanding is that the Japanese were quite stingy with promotion and with awards and accolades. They just expected it of their people, whereas the Germans, everything was about the decorations. And the Americans, everybody wanted to get the Medal of Honor, and except ironically a lot of the people who actually got it. But you promote these, like the guys from Iwo Jima, if you've seen Flags of Our Fathers, the guys who raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, the second flag on Mount Suribachi. They got the famous photograph. And half of them were killed before they could be sent home to do their bond raising thing. But the four of them that came back, Bradley, the Navy corpsman, Ira Hayes, the Pima Indian, and the other couple of guys, they were tortured. Some of them were tortured people. I mean, they did not lead, especially Ira Hayes. He did not lead a happy life. And everywhere he went, that kind of haunted him. It's the only thing he'd ever been remembered for. Wars are won by the side who makes the least mistakes. There's something to be said for that. And but von Richthofen was the perfect hero for Germany. He was a baron, so there's the magic goofus dust of royalty. He was single, so he was attractive to all the ladies because he was only in his early 20s. He was apparently he got his nails manicured and everything, which was not nothing effeminate. That was not uncommon with the aristocracy. He kept trophies. He was a trophy hunter. He was an excellent marksman. He was kind of a man's man in that regard. Sort of a little bit like T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, sort of the man's man. But, of course, that's a whole nother story because that story gets weird. But what I'm driving at is that he made it great. He was young, he was good looking, he had the medal, he was photogenic, top score, all that stuff. He was the perfect person to make this big hero out of. Some of the German aces were enlisted men. A lot of people don't realize the Germans had flying sergeants, and one of them, I think his name was Fritz Rumi, if I remember right. I forget, it was 20 or 30 kills. Nobody's ever heard of him. He's not an officer. He's not part of the aristocracy. So, you can stick all the badges for merit on him you want. They're just going to forget about him because he's just a commoner. And but we're not going to make a hero out of this. But however, in the movie The Blue Max, that is exactly what makes Stockel important to the general. Is I need to make a hero out of him because he's common as dirt. And my dad always thought the whole idea behind the Blue Max of the general making a hero out of this commoner was kind of silly. But we did love the flying scenes. Although Stockel was a believable character. Yeah, the word on T. Lawrence, that's a whole nother place we're not going to go. I imagine you guys already know. If not, I'll let you read about it. Yeah, I didn't really like. You're right about they need to make a movie about these guys. I really didn't care for the movie Flyboys, and it wasn't just for the technical stuff, like giving a Newport the performance of an X-wing fighter. It just wasn't. It wasn't a bad movie. It just wasn't as good as it really could have been. But I would love to have met Eric Brown, and. He the British Chuck Yeager. Yeah, everyone remembers Ursula from the Blue Max, and I was like 12 when I saw that movie. So can we get past this silly part and get back to the flying? But if I was going to center a movie around one pilot and try to make a real World War I flying story, the first question I would have to ask myself is, what kind of story am I going to tell? Because the pilots were very different. Am I trying to make it about a bad boy? Go with someone like Mick Manick? Am I trying to make it about someone who survived the war? Then I go with Billy Bishop. Am I trying to make it about someone, if I really want to make it a bad boy about America, I make it about Frank Luke. If I want to make it about someone who was lovable, I make it about Nungesser. If I want to make it about someone who was arrogant and annoying, René Honk. If I want to make it about someone who was very likable but didn't survive the war, then Albert Ball. Apparently he was a very likable young fellow. I've read different stories about how he got shot down. He was in SE5, and one of them was that he used to fly by this clock tower every day to check the time, and some German saw him and set a machine gun up there one day. Sounds like a wives' tale, but you never know. Manick wound up, apparently he really hated the Germans and was a ruthless attacker. And but his big fear was burning alive. When his plane caught on fire, he jumped out of it. And the French, by the time they found him, the French had already buried him and covered his grave with flowers. Frank Luke, who, when his friend was killed, he went bat crap crazy. When they told him they were going to send him home, he stole a Spad, went and shot up a couple of balloons. The Arizona Balloon Buster. Went and shot up a couple of balloons, and then when they shot him down, he crashed, jumped out with his 45, jumped into a graveyard, and tried to shoot it out with German infantry. So goes the story. It did not end well. And then Rickenbacker, who survived the war and never got a scratch. Roy Brown, who's credited with shooting down the Red Baron, but had a stomach problem. They wound up having to send him back home. There are really a lot of colorful characters. On the German side, if you said, who would you make a movie about on the German side? No doubt. There's two people, and we've already talked about them. A good one would be Werner Voss, and another really good one would be Ernst Udet. Two extremely colorful guys, especially Udet. That guy was, when you think of the colorful aviator, Udet, the thing was, he apparently wasn't real tall. He was bald. If you watch The Great Waldo Pepper, at the end he meets one of his heroes, a German ace he'd always lied about having seen in combat. That guy, short, bald, kind of round-faced, absolutely patterned directly after Ernst Udet. In fact, I think the guy's name was Ernst Kessler. He completely patterned after Ernst Udet, right down to being involved in the movies after the war, which I believe Udet was. So that would be a really interesting character to do it about. Werner Voss, who Wasn't Voss the one that was strangled with his own Blue Max fighting communists after the war, something like that? I mean, weird. A different world. Yeah, Lawrence. You're talking about T. Lawrence. Lawrence made a connection with the people of the Middle East that he was a very broad-minded individual to be willing to break with the traditional caste of British society at the time and treat the Arabs as equals. And in fact, he very much appreciated that they had a lot to offer. But it was the age of empire. Oh, I didn't know that Manic had vision problems. Rudel, you're talking about the Stuka driver, Hans Erich Rudel. Sarah Jane, if that's who you're talking about, he had probably the best guy to ever grab the controls of a Stuka. And the Germans actually had a bounty on him because he was knocking out so many tanks. Although most of them were put back into action once they were fixed. But the reason you would have a little trouble getting funding to make a movie about Rudel was if what I understand about him is correct, is he was an unapologetic Nazi. Still an impressive individual. Fought a good chunk of the war on one leg. And there's that film footage on YouTube of him and Galan and a couple others hanging around a German airfield waiting for the Americans to come take them all as POWs at the end of the war. And the guy looked like a movie star, over 6 feet tall, slender, athletic build. I think he'd been an Olympiad. He escaped about a dozen times. He'd been shot down so many times. Flying a Stuka, and he always got away. One time I think it was a Russian, shot him in the leg as he was running away. So they had to amputate the leg. So he kept fighting in the war. He had the highest medal. That was the Knight's Cross with swords and diamonds. The Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with swords and diamonds. But even after the war was over, he never once apologized. He was like, he still believed in National Socialism. And I don't know if you could get a movie about him made, but it is very fair to say he's an extremely interesting character. I mean, you can't. One thing that I've learned is, and it has changed my view of history. The old saying that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Everybody sees the world through their own prism, and a lot of times people hold what views of the world and how it should be that are not at all popular for understandable reasons. And I'm kind of skirting the edges here so we don't get taken down or anything. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their own story and that they're not an interesting person or somebody worthy of study. You don't have to like what they believe, but you still better respect them. Because you look at what these people put up. Don't forget, a lot of these people, like Otto Skorzeny and the rest of them, they were, as soon as the war was over, we're grabbing these people up. Okay, you're going to come work for us now. And so apparently Skorzeny, if you want to believe the legend, Skorzeny, who was the guy that broke Mussolini out and did a whole bunch of other stuff, he also led that operation, the Battle of Bulge, with the Germans dressed in American uniforms. By the way, he didn't like doing that operation. Eventually those guys got rid of their American uniforms, and they did not like fighting in American uniforms. They were ordered to do it, so they did it. But under the rules of war, they got caught, they got shot. In fact, some of them did. Oh, okay, Needham. Sorry, you got to run. Take care. But that doesn't mean you throw away their experience. The war is over. Back then the OSS and the nascent CIA was kind of like, look, these guys have skill sets we need. And so one day you're fighting, under the swastika. The next day you're fighting to defend democracy under the American flag. There's one soldier who was killed in Vietnam fighting as an American. I think he'd been a Finnish soldier. I think he was a Finn. And he'd fought the Russians. And then he joined the Wehrmacht so that he could keep fighting the Russians. And when the war was over, he joined the American Army. And he was killed as a Green Beret in a helicopter crash in Vietnam. I forget his name offhand, but think the history guy or some of these people probably have or Simple History, one of them did a thing on him. I'd read about him before. But, yeah, and then Operation Paperclip and Overcast, round up these guys. Real quick story on that before we go to the questions. So I have some questions you guys had asked earlier I thought we'd talk about. There was a German, he wasn't actually a scientist, he was an engineer. And you guys are probably all familiar with one night when the occupying Russians got all the German rocket scientists drunk, threw them on a train, and the next thing they woke up in Russia. Yeah, he was in I think he was in the Waffen SS, but yeah. And Larry Lane, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, they wanted him, and they wanted the Russians wanted Rudel, and they wanted Hartman, and we actually, much to our disgrace, we gave them Hartman. And Hartman was another one they had a bounty on. The rifle that I have is, you're talking about World War I, World War II snipers. The rifle I have is a P-17, based on the British P-14 Enfield, pattern 14. It was actually the rifle they like to use as a sniping rifle because it's a heavier barrel, pound heavier, and more accurate than the Springfield. But oh crap, totally forgot what I was talking about. Started reading the questions. Yeah, cat and tangent here. Woof! So we can go to the questions then, I guess. Oh, you're talking about Operation Paperclip and the rest of them. Yeah, the Germans that went to Russia, turned out the big scientists they grabbed there, these weren't the guys who designed the rockets. These were the guys who built them. They didn't know how to design stuff, but they were able to show the Russians how to set up production lines, so it was still of some value. But the Russians never trusted them, especially the Russian scientists. They were outraged that, we don't need these Germans. We can design our own rockets. We have Koryolev. And eventually they sent the guys back. Yeah, Larry do anything he could to keep fighting the Nazis. He really hated the communists. I think that's one reason he wanted to go to Vietnam. So, you guys had asked some questions recently, so let me get to those. Question number 1. Okay, that was supposed to fit the screen. Whoops, sorry. He's gone. Let me turn the camera back on. Where did I turn it off at? Oh, there it is. Hit the wrong button. Okay. Let's make this. All right. I was asked, what do you do with kits you know you will never ever build, or kits that were bought with an idea in mind that will never see the light of day for one reason or another? Oh, I watch Peninsular Seniors. I have watched, in fact, Mac Mashat gave one of them, and I've watched several of them. If you guys, Peninsular Seniors is, I think, out in the San Diego area, and it's just what the name is. People live in the local area, local airport, and they have these distinguished dignitaries of aviation come in and talk about what they've had SR-71 pilots and test pilots and artists and all kinds of stuff. That's great. It's just a very informal chat, and I love it. I like what they do. So, what do you... Are you, so, to the question, what do you do with kits you know you will never ever build, or kits that were bought with an idea in mind that will never see the light of day for one reason or another? Class, they go in the stash. That was waiting. I figured somebody, the first thing was going to be the stash. That's where they go with me. Let's see. And we'll ask, swap, that's a good one. In my case, normally, sometimes I'll gift them out. depending on what it is, if it's somebody I think will actually build it. I rarely ever actually sell a model. Are you looking to do another space station? When are you looking to do another space station? Let's see. Between now and never. If that kit with the instruction sheet befell me again, I think what I would probably do is build the core station and somehow out of like light aluminum or something or mylar, hand make a metal framed solar array for it, and then hang it from the ceiling by multiple wires where that would not be under any stress. But there's just no frickin' way I'm going to. There's no. I suppose if you put a steel rod through it, you could use those really heavy solar panels that come with it. It's got this huge stand that's got like 4 balancing points on it. I'm like, this thing's a train wreck. Probably just use it for kish bash parts, to be honest. Do you really need an airbrush to do ones in a 1/48 scale? Well, yesterday, when I was putting the initial coat on the Lag 5, I used a brush, and of course I had the paints thinned a little bit, but the paint marks kept showing through, and it just didn't look good. And if I didn't thin the paint, well, of course the brush I was using was was brand new, but it just seems like the airbrush leaves such a nice even coat. It's really kind of hard to beat it. The brush is good for something, better for some things like propeller blades and things and wheels and things like that. But I got to be honest, I find that airbrush really does work a lot better. You can feather the edges and everything on it real nicely. But and the worst part is that if you paint and the brush leaves streaks, the smaller the scale, the more they show, because the larger they are relative to the scale. But that's my experience. Take them out from time to time and sniff them. And the older they're like wine, the older the kit gets, the better it smells. All right, let's go to another question here. Any input from the glue trooper? Okay, we have a glue trooper here that is moving from Florida to the Carolinas. Why he would leave the wonderful state of Florida, I don't know, but that's his business. And he wants any advice on moving models, tools, and that kind of stuff. All I can think is pack carefully and keep it all together. Use lots of cotton if you're packing already built models. Is it my most viewed video? No, Estes, I don't think it's my most viewed, but I will tell you this. I had one on the Pearl Harbor P-40 boys that was just shy of 1 million views by itself when it was taken down. And I was taken down for copyright because I'd used music and stuff, and they didn't ask me or say, you know, this, they just took it down. So somebody, I guess, complained, or they may just not have liked the material. YouTube is really weird on how it does things. And, you know, in fact, Mike and I were just talking about, you know, about monetizing channels, and you're really at the whim of the YouTube gods when you anytime that you anytime you have a monetization, then you're just completely at the whims of whatever the guys at YouTube, their algorithm, or the people, whatever else think. I have a lot more latitude since I don't monetize. Ugh. Let me see something here. I'm just trying to see if I can find. It should just be a click of a button to. You've received a copyright claim. I got so many of those things. I'm sitting here in my thing looking for. I don't know which one's the most viewed. The Jeep one has a lot. Let's see. Styrofoam peanuts. Pack carefully. Leave nothing behind. YouTube's woke baby. Yeah, it is. Plastic bags. Okay. No, I have not, Kenneth. I have not received what you were talking about. Let me check my email real quick. But I have not. Maxsmodels at yahoo.com. That's where you're sending it. Ah, John has that Aurora kit with the pilot. I said to check my email, and he just sent me a picture of it. Oh, nice work. No, Kenneth, I am not seeing it anywhere. Maxsmodels at yahoo.com, one word, all lowercase. All my kits will go to the trash when I'm gone. My sister died. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Lance. And none of I have friends. Well, hopefully they won't go in the trash, but I guess I'm a little. Oh, the chat I had with Mike Machat was a couple of days ago, but that was just me and him in person. That was that wasn't something we were doing on air. We've zoomed a couple of times. He and I have a couple of videos that we zoomed on, not on the channel, but he and I don't have the. I don't think we have the ability to podcast live or anything. I really don't know. Okay, here's a question for the viewers. Go, Sangwar. Let it shoot. Let it rip. Okay. I'm a little concerned about the future of the hobby, but we do occasionally see young people in the store. You know, although we've lost a lot on the economy of scale because not as many people build, it's still a popular hobby, and the products have gotten better. You know, so there's that. What is the oldest kit you own, built or not built? Well, that would have been probably the Spad that was gifted to me and the Stinson. But I actually gave those to a collector who actually has a very complete collection of and takes very good care of a lot of models. And I figured you guys have been so generous to me since I knew they would have a good home there. I sent them to him. And the Spad would have been the oldest. I have some Comet wood kits that were sent to me, and I don't think I have anything that date. I probably have a few kits that date back to the 50s, but most of them are in the 60s. I'm not actually sure what the oldest one is now. And well, the Spad and the Stinson would have gone back probably. The Spad, I think, was a hot kit. That would have probably gone back to the mid-50s. So would the Stinson. The Stinson was one of them that didn't have windows or anything. It was just solid pieces you glued together. You just painted the windows on. Although he passed before he got around to it, there were some very detailed drawings, hand drawings in there. That apparently the gentleman who had originally owned it had intended to cut out the windows and make a full detailed interior for it. Well, I told my wife that I'm to be cremated, so maybe she can check the models in the crematorium with me, and I can just go down with the plastic, and we can bond into one, So instead of having the powder, they can just throw a plastic and ash ball. Oh my God, that's how my mind works. Spad or Newport, which was better? Oh man. That's like asking what's better, a Spitfire or a Messerschmitt. Okay, Ken, I'm sorry, batteries are on low. Take care, man. I think the Spad was. Both designs kept getting improved. The Spad was certainly sturdy as heck. That's a good question. I would say the two are probably on par with one another. I wouldn't turn my back on either one of them in a dogfight. All right, let's see what the next question is. Have you ever done any vacuform kits? Yes, I have. And not that many, but I have done them. I did, and I actually had somebody give me a big F-106, and I think my mom threw the thing away after I moved out. She just saw the fat plastic, thought it was junk. I was actually going to make an interior for that one. One thing I warn you guys, if you're going to do vacuform kits, especially if they're any size, the cool thing about vac is you can get all kinds of stuff made in it. I mean, it's just amazing how many vac kits are out there. And nice ball of Max. Oh my god. Okay, I got a t-shirt. When I die, me and my models are to be cremated together and formed to do a big ball of Max and then shot into space. Then hurtle back down and burn up in the atmosphere. That's the way to go, baby. Jimmy Doohan style. Anyway, if you're building a vac kit, one thing I highly recommend, and I got this information from a vac builder who did fantastic work. I didn't know you could make vac kits look that good because you're dealing with such a thin medium. Some people put clays and stuff in them to get some rigidity, but he said all you have to do is take balsa and build a little internal frame, and you have something to hold on to. I actually have a vac kit in there now that I got of the British Red Arrows. It's been sitting on there for a while. I haven't had a chance to get to it. And of course, it comes with little pieces of plastic that you glue to the inside, so that when so on the inside when you make the two pieces, this piece of glue is a backing, and you put several of them in. That way, there's something for to hold on to other than just those thin edges. So building vacuform models is its own skill set, and building some kind of structure inside to build it around, even just some balsa spars or something for the wings, really makes it a lot more rigid and easier to work with. But it's still tricky stuff to work with. But there's so many vac kits out there. There's some kits. It's going to be in the next viewers build. One of you guys built a beautiful little Navajo. And I used to fly Navajo, so I looked for a model. I think I found a resin kit one time, was $50. I don't want that bad. But he did a vac kit. He did a really nice job on it. And even they're hard to find. But vacs, you can find stuff you're not going to find anywhere else. Why no one ever made a regular styrene Navajo? I don't know. It's a popular airplane. But anyway, oh yeah, you guys have been talking a lot here about the soldiers being on meth, like the Germans and the Japanese. Indy Nidell over at Time Ghost and World War II and the Great War channel. I imagine most of you guys are probably familiar with it. Anyway, they did an entire episode about the Germans, the drugs the Germans gave their soldiers to keep them going, and explains a lot. Even today, in the American military, the pilots have go pills. I don't know what's in them, but you guys remember about 8-10 years ago, there was a huge flap when an American fighter pilot at night strafed what he thought was Al Qaeda. It turned out to be, I think it was Canadians at a rifle range, at a night range, and it turned out he was on go pills. That was part of his defense. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's the thing, is that vacs are also easy to make. I have a mold that I made. I've vacuumed a few parts for things, and there are all kinds of YouTube. You'd be surprised how easy it is to make a vacuum machine. I mean, an old vacuum cleaner, a heating element, some plastic, a wooden frame, a plant. And there are guys making big C-3PO costumes and everything, and doing really nice ones too. Vac is really incredible way to work around for a lot of stuff. If you guys ever watch Face Off, they're often using vacuform parts. They'll make the clay and they'll vac it. Oh, I want a vacuform machine. I could make one, but I got that little Mattel one that I used for making little parts of the models, and it works. That's how I made the Broussard collectors for my Enterprise, because my original Enterprise kit is like a second gen one, the one that's up on the shelf, and I lighted it, and I made vacuform Broussard collectors and everything for it, so it works. And I put got the little bouncy balls that the flickering lights, just stuck those in there with batteries, just flipped them on, and the Broussard collectors do all, glitter all kinds of colors. Cool. Then the batteries died and the wires broke. And I'm not breaking this thing open to go fix those things. It sits on the shelf anyway. It's like, that's one of the problems with electrifying models, putting light kits in them, and it's great when it works, and then when it stops working, like, you really want to tear it apart to try and fix it? I don't. Okay. Next question. Let's move that down here. Okay, this is actually a statement someone made, and I have modified this because I think there were some typos. It was about vinyl kits, and I had mentioned that I built a vinyl Mr. Spock. That was my first vinyl kit. It's on the shelf today. And I used enamel right on the vinyl, and to this day, the pants are still kind of tacky. That never really reacted with the plastic, didn't really harden properly. He said vinyl kits always use acrylics. So he's used acrylics and enamels combined, but always put a base coat of acrylic paint. The other thing is warm the vinyl to cut it. Use a very sharp blade, then clean it with a sharp blade and maybe some wet dry sanding or whatever. Do not make it more hot because it goes floppy. So I know a lot of the figurines out there are vinyl kits, and some of you guys, a lot of people haven't done it. I'm ex-military, I was in the Army. Yeah. But anyway, that was the. Just thought I would tack that in there because I had a few questions on vinyl kits in the past, and somebody answered them. I thought I'd throw this not so much as a question as a statement. And I think that is all the prepared material that I had. So, yes, warm the vinyl to cut it. Now, but how do you warm it, Sungwar? Do you use warm water? Do you put it in your heater? Would a hot knife do the job? So you having any trouble with enamels going right onto the vinyl? But do you prime them with enamel, or you prime them with acrylic, or? Warm water. Okay. Need anything blown up? Hey, if I need something blowing up, I'm blowing it up myself. And I have been thinking about making another movie, but and last when I started that Godzilla movie, I wound up spending 8 months on it, and it was just an excuse to buy more German tanks. Gave a bunch of them to my nephew. Still have a few of them. To me, a white primer. Okay, good to know. Well, you guys can vote later on which is the worst box art. Oh, let's get those up here. Kind of a target-rich environment. So many bad box arts to choose from. And I didn't even get into the space stuff. There were some Lulus there. I feel like I was picking on Aurora a little too hard there, when we all know should be the winner. I still can't believe that actually went out there in the world, but it did. That is a real box art. The ship on the green jello, yeah. That was Trumpeter that did that. There's your ship on the green jello. Yeah, between that and that ME-110, we definitely got ourselves a target-rich environment. Yeah, I think I'm going to take the Kaiju off the list because, not that the art was that bad. They were just making pictures of what was in the... Here's our Baleo shark plane. That Trumpeter had some genuinely crappy box art. Caustic waters. Whatever you do, don't fall in the water. Oh, really, Ron? Oh, you made something that's been into space. Well, guys, we've been going at this 2.5 hours. I'm going to call it a day. Oh, who just got here? Hoodal. Heck yeah, for shizzle. Let's move that up the ladder. There's the Cobra with the changing tail rotor. It's an ambidextrous helicopter. So, oh my gosh. Personally, I just can't get over that ME-110, the sausage plane, the Wiener Schnitzel, the Schnitzel bomber. We're rounding it down to our last few. The Eldritch. Is that from what, the Philadelphia experiment? Yeah. Well, guys, I'm going to put some stuff up here, some pictures. I'll let you guys chat amongst yourselves for a while. I'm going to unplug the mic and kill the camera, and I'll shut it down in a few minutes. I want to thank everyone for coming out. Hope you enjoyed your afternoon. It's always good to have these little get-togethers. Yeah. Mowing the lawn Saturday. Yeah, I think Columbia is going to win as the absolute worst. It's almost in a category by itself. Well, guys, take care, and appreciate you checking in. Had a good time. Always model on.